Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new venture from Fantasy Football Scout, the home of fantasy football. 8 p.m. on Thursdays, we're going to do spaces to ask questions of someone much better at fantasy football than I am. If you follow Scout, if you're here, you probably know what Scout is, but we are the original and best fantasy football site in the world. Set up in 2007. We've been the home of fantasy football ever since, and I'm very, very happy. By the way, my name's Ed. I'm your host for these things. But today, I'm not important. The important person is my guest. I have FPL General, the legend. His name is Mark, by the way, if you didn't know. He's not actually an army general, I don't think. Maybe he'll tell us he is. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Good to be here, Ed. Thanks for the invite. As I was saying, this is my first appearance on a Spaces, so hopefully this all goes smoothly. I listened in a few times, been kind of in the background, but it's good to actually pop my cherry. So thanks for getting me on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for being here. A lot of people want your advice. People are requesting to join already to ask you questions. That's absolutely fine. We're going to do that in a minute, but I've got some initial questions just for myself. I'm not very good at fantasy football. I know I run Fantasy Football Scout, but I'm not brilliant at the game. I'm trying to get better. So I've got a couple of questions. Is that all right, Mark, if I throw a couple your way?
Yeah, go ahead, and hopefully by the end of the season, Ed, we'll have you up to shape as an FPL manager.
If I beat you, Mark, then that's all I'm aiming for. If I beat you, I'm going to retire from life. So there you go.
Yeah, if you beat me, I'm going to also retire from the game.
Great. Okay. So first of all, question, right? So obviously FPLs is kind of coming back now. Everyone's getting back into it, registering their teams. There's something like 2 million teams nearly already registered. Do you enjoy the break in the summer, or do you miss FPL?
I definitely enjoy the break. I think as when you're a content creator, a season is a long one, especially when you've got a World Cup in between. It can become a slog. I tend to find I hit a wall around March, April time. And I'm looking forward to the season finishing, looking forward to a break. And I do give me a couple of weeks off. I'm kind of craving. I get those FPL cravings again, as most of us do. But yeah, certainly at the moment, with the young kid and stuff, really, really enjoying this break. The season still feels like a lifetime away. Feels like the game's been live for quite a while, but it probably is, just over a week at this stage. But absolutely enjoy the break. What I would say I miss more than FPL is just football on the telly. I think that's what got me into FPL in the first place back in the day. And It feels like a very long summer without any, major summer tournaments and stuff like that. Women's World Cup starting shortly. I'm going to be tuning in. Ireland are there for the first time, so I'm looking forward to having some football back on the telly. And then Premier League, it is 4 weeks away, but that will roll around quickly. So yes, not missing FPL massively, but certainly missing football on the box.
Of course, yeah. And now it's all obviously coming cascading upon us, all the fixtures and the prices and everything. I mean, how's your first draft looking? You don't need to read it out or anything, but what are the big questions you've got at this point in pre-season?
Yeah, I think as the days pass by, I think I'm going to have more and more questions. Formation is kind of a big one that came into my mind, and just in the last day or two. Initially, I thought, definitely 3-5-2. There's loads of midfielders, but I think the more you look at it, and the more you play around with it, there's viable 4-4-2 formations. I've seen a few people posting 4-5-1s. There's quite a few different routes you can go. So I think formation will be a big question mark for me. Goalkeepers is completely up in the air. And then it's, which midfielders do you go for? We've got so many options. And another big one, I think, is Haaland's a definite, but who partners him up front in a front two? So there's still a lot to decide on over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? I mean, I've got a few more questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say to everyone who's listening, there's we're heading towards 100 people listening, which is brilliant. If you want to ask a question of FPL General, Mark, then request, and we'll do our best to get through everyone. Okay, so this is a very fortunate opportunity we've all got to ask questions of a FPL veteran. So request, and we'll let you in. But as people are requesting, let me ask you one more. Any triple ups this season, or at the moment, are you thinking of any triple ups? That's a question I'm asking myself at the moment when I'm looking at my draft, because Arsenal have got good fixtures. You could say Man United maybe a triple up, Man City. What do you think?
In my current draft, which is basically just draft number 2, I made a team when the game launched, and I didn't touch it until a day or two. I like to kind of go a week between drafts if I can, just let things ferment and see how my thoughts develop. In terms of triple ups, I think the only one I've got at the moment is Arsenal. looking at Gabriel in defence, who's a very good price at 5 million. Saka is almost locked into my team. And then up front, I've replaced Nkunku from the first draft with Gabriel Jesus in my second draft. So there is an Arsenal triple up there. I could very well end up on a Manchester United triple up also. Currently have Luke Shaw and Bruno Fernandes. But if I do some jiggling, I quite fancy the Bruno Fernandes Rashford double up.
Yeah.
I can't really decide which option I want. And I think the Bruno Rashford double up will become more and more popular as we get closer to game week 1.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Nkunku there. He's one that I'm really. I always when all the prices first come out, I have an immediate sort of who do I want up front, and in my head it's Haaland, Kane, and Nkunku. Now that's hard to get to, of course, but they're the three that are immediately in my head, and I'll slowly probably get dragged towards some sort of template front three. But Nkunku is one that I played Fantasy Champions League last year, and he's just amazing. And I'm tempted to go with him, but also it's the Chelsea factor, it's the new to the league factor, it's should we wait factor. Anyway, less about me. We've got our first question, I think. FPL Buzz, unmute yourself. Hello, how are you?
Hi there, guys. Yeah, all good. Basically, my team where I am at the draft, I want to get your opinion on Brighton midfielders and more particularly Enciso. 5.5 million. It seems like an absolute bargain, but is it a defo to go with, or is pre-season a big kind of is that the way to look at
litmus test? Yeah. Mark, is it too good to be true? Enciso at 5.5.
I'm finding the Brighton options in general quite tricky. No pun intended there. But even I've got the FPL website open in front of me. When you look at the Brighton midfielders, there must be about 15 options there. Now, most of them are 4.5 and 5 million options. But in my current draft, I've kind of naturally gravitated towards Mitoma because I had him a lot of last season. I think he's a fantastic player. Yes, he tailed off a bit towards the end, but I've got a lot of faith in him to have another good season and then possibly move on to a bigger team the following year. So for me, Mitoma is number one when it comes to Brighton midfielders. Enciso, I'm kind of putting Enciso and Evan Ferguson in the same bracket at this stage. I'm slightly concerned about their minutes. There's lots of options at Brighton. I can see a lot of rotation, especially when Europe kicks in. We could see, Ferguson and Enciso, the Premier League minutes could be managed. We could see them getting starts in Europe because they're pretty young. So that puts me off initially. So I'm kind of gravitating towards Mitoma. I probably even prefer Pascal Gross and Solly March than Enciso, but I might have to reevaluate that after 3 or 4 game weeks if Enciso is getting good game time, because there's no doubt he's a quality player and could have a big season.
Mark, does McAllister leaving help Enciso?
To be honest, I don't know if that will have much of an impact. I mean, you could say maybe one less option for him to rotate with, but again, there's so many options. They've added a few players. Dahoud's there. You've got the other guys, Buonante. There's some quality players, Sarmiento. De Zerbi's got so many options, and I think the squad is certainly geared towards a European season where it could be frustrating for us FPL managers. Even someone like Mitoma, maybe he won't be as regular in terms of 90 minutes as he was last season.
Okay, we're going to go next. Thank you very much for your question, FPL Buzz. You can request again if you want to come back on that, but we're going to try and get through everyone. So, Mark Cram, what's your question, Mark? Nice to meet you. How are you? You have to unmute yourself. Yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure. How are you?
I'm good. My first space too, and actually FPL General, Mark, we have been messaging. I've asked you so many questions in the last few years. We've interacted a huge amount through your pods.
You're that Mark he always talks about in our group chat. No, joke, of course. Go on, Mark. What's your question?
But lovely to speak to you, Mark. So on the last episode of the podcast, you mentioned that Trent was essential, and I'm seeing it in every single draft on Twitter. I don't have Trent. I've gone for 5 fairly heavy-hitting midfielders in Bruno, Saka, Son, Foden and Maddison in my current draft. And I just don't see the value in going for Trent at 8 million, where you don't get the same 5 million midfielders as you do for 5 million defenders. So, Mark, as you said that he's essential, sell him to me.
Yeah, Mark, good to chat to you. Good to hear your voice rather than reading the questions for the podcast. Thanks for always sending them in. You definitely win the award for most questions asked ever on the 59th minute. So thanks for that. In terms of Trent Alexander-Arnold, like I said, I've only made 2 drafts. I think I did say Trent was essential, or at least very close to essential, alongside Haaland in my Gameweek 1 team. I'm basically afraid to make a draft without Trent because I feel like I'll probably like it once I kind of pump a bit more cash into midfield instead of having Trent. I'm not overly keen on Mbeumo. Don't like Mbeumo as much as other people do. And I don't really want to go for two 6.5 million midfielders in Mbeumo and Matoma. So I really should make a draft without Trent, and I'm sure I will at some point over the next week or two. But he was one of the first names I picked when the game was launched. I didn't mind the price rise. I've got so much faith in the player. When it comes down to it, I don't like sitting watching games without a player that I rate extremely highly, both as a footballer and as an FPL prospect. It makes me think of Cancelo when he was on fire at Manchester City. I remember sold him for a couple of weeks and could barely sit down to watch a Man City game. And I feel like if I start the season without Trent, it'll be the same. I'll be avoiding the Liverpool games because of how good he is. But I think I did say he was close to essential in the first podcast, but I think it would be silly of me not to make a draft over the next couple of weeks without him and see how it feels, because again, it comes back to all those midfielders. There's so many good options and obviously a huge price saving if you don't go with Trent. I think my concern, if you don't start with him, kind of tricky to get there. If he, let's say he has a really good game week 1, then you might think, right, that was a mistake. I want to get him for Bournemouth game week 2. How do you get there if you don't have cash in the bank? So I think at this stage, I'm probably about 75% in favour of starting with him.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. That's great. And if you do end up without Trent, then it's Mark Cram's idea. So you can thank him.
Exactly.
Just to say, just a little pause there, Mark Cram. We will come back to you. I know you've requested again. We're going to try and get through some more questions. We will come back to you. Just to say that we've broken 100 people listening. Thank you very much. Please do retweet the Spaces link. So the link that you click to listen, retweet that to get as many people listening as possible. That'd be really helpful to us. We'd love more people to have the chance to ask Mark a question, FPL General. Let's go to FPL Thinker. Go for it.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself and ask a question. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Ed, good to see you in Spaces.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and good to see Mark also. So
Thank you.
yeah, I've been following Mark for quite a long time, and he's one of the most consistent FPL managers, as his record speaks, for top 1K and top 10K finishes.
Yeah,
and he also makes most not to discredit, but most safe moves and best transfers. So just Mark, I wanted to know a theoretical question. Let's say you are targeting to win FPL. So what changes would you bring to your game or any person's game who has a top 5K or a 1K finish, so which will enable him to get to that first mark?
Yeah, good question. And thanks for tuning into the Spaces. It's something I've often thought about. I've been very consistent in terms of top 50Ks, top 10Ks, and all the rest. But to get to those upper echelons of a top 500, top 100, and as you say, what do you need to do to win the game? And I think the more seasons I play this, I realize how much luck you need to get to those really, really high levels. And I guess I don't really go into a season to win FPL because I know how there's probably more chance of me winning the lottery than winning FPL. But I think the way I approach it is try and set myself up to just have as good a season as possible, maybe until around game week 30, game week 32. And if you get to that point and you're a top 10K, top 5K, top 1K, that's maybe when I might deviate from my very safe, very boring approach. Because for me, number one is just to have a good season. Well, more so not to have a bad season. So that is why I tend to play very safely. And maybe I should be more adventurous, more aggressive. But when I've got a style of play that tends to be quite steady and quite consistent, it's very hard to move away from that. Especially when I've played the game for about 20 years now. Seriously for at least 10. With good results, it's very hard to deviate and be play to win rather than play for a really good finish. So I think for me there's a lot of luck involved to get to number one if you want to win it. But like I said, if you can just play, I like the approach of just playing maybe the first 30 game weeks to slow and steady, and then if you're lucky enough to be at a good rank at that point, that's possibly when you can be a bit more aggressive when it comes to second wild cards and stuff like that, or maybe something different with your triple captainship. So yeah, it's something I probably need to think about a bit more if I wanted to give a better answer on that. But yeah, you're probably not going to see me do anything too exciting this season.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, you talk about obviously the question there was about your luck, not your luck, your consistency. And just so you know, the person who won FPL last year, Ali, FPL Guns, is writing exclusively for Scout this year. And do you know where Mark? Do you know where he finished last year? He finished first this year. Do you know where he finished last year?
About 200th.
Yeah, something crazy like that. So I mean, God blimey, what a record that is, even if it's only 2 years. Incredible. So yeah, I mean, consistent managers are great. I am all over the place. I'm glad you're here. Let's take a question from Manprit or FPL Junkie. FPL Junkie, ask your question. How are you,
I'm
first?
good, buddy. How are you doing, Ben?
Ben, Ed. I'm Ed. He's Mark. Don't worry.
Sorry.
Nobody cares about me.
No,
as long as you get
okay,
Mark's name right, we're
I
fine.
remember now. Actually, I was chatting with another friend called Ben, so apologies for that. Hi, Mark. Yeah, I had a question. My question was, is it worth getting Salah over Trent? And because if most people are going with Trent, and Salah could be a differential if we do that. And the other question is there any point investing in the 6 million forwards like DCL and Ferguson?
Yeah,
I'll be honest, Mark. I'll back that Calvert-Lewin question. I love that. So I'll ask that, but also do that because I'm thinking of Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Manfred. It's like I said, I've only made 2 drafts so far. Mohamed Salah hasn't been in any of them, but I don't feel completely comfortable about doing that. I mean, he's been absolutely incredible for the last 4 or 5 seasons. Been a very reliable captaincy candidate, and everyone's talking about this Gameweek 2 fixture at home to Bournemouth. He's a very good captaincy candidate for that one when Haaland plays Newcastle. So again, like Trent, I haven't made a team without Trent yet. I haven't made a team with Salah, but I will be making a couple of drafts with him. In particular, when I do drop Trent out of the team, there's going to be some extra cash there. There could be a possibly, 2.5 million extra to do some upgrades in midfield. And I will play around with a Haaland and Salah draft to see what it feels like. But I think, again, most likely, given how many good value midfielders there are at other teams, Saka, Rashford, Bruno, even players like Maddison. I think Jared Bowen's made it into my latest draft. I'm not seeing him in too many places. Again, might not make the cut. Heung-min Son. I find it quite hard to justify the outlay for Salah, given the price of some of the alternatives who could match him, over the course of the season for 2-3 million less. So Salah, not going to rule him out just yet, but I do need to play around and see what it feels like. But I think gut feeling at the moment it's going to be Trent and Haaland and no Salah.
Mark, can I ask you what's changed with Salah? Because the last 4 years, or what more, it's been you got to start with Salah. If you don't start with Salah, you're a moron. And now it seems to be that the most owned midfielder. I'm just on the website now. Is what? Saka, then Rashford, then Matoma, then Salah's 5th. What's changed? Because he did have a good season last season in terms of points. I know it wasn't his top levels, but what is it? Is it the existence of Haaland at that premium bracket? You just can't fit him in anymore. Is it Liverpool not doing so well? What is it?
It's definitely the emergence of Mr. Haaland. I think I'm not ready to take the FPL king crown from Salah just yet, but Haaland's first season, was absolutely incredible. And before Haaland joined the league, when the FPL website launched each season, it was very easy. You just go and you pick Salah first, and you pick the rest. But now you go in and you pick Haaland, and you pick the rest. So
do you know what percentage Haaland's at right now? Try and guess.
It's probably about 85% or something like that.
Oh, this is why we've got the man. It's 85.5. I can't believe you were 0.5% out. Unbelievable. Sorry, carry on.
That's disappointing. That's disappointing. So it's Haaland's kind of changed the game. He's changed the landscape. He's the must-have number 1 pick now, and it's very hard to make your second pick a 12.5 million option. It's a massive chunk of your budget on 2 players, and I think with Salah as well, I'm looking at his history here. That's 6 incredible seasons at Liverpool. But, how much more does he have in him as well? Will there be a decline soon? Was last season the start of that decline? Very dangerous thing to say because it is Mohamed Salah. And I've still got a lot of faith in him. But I'm looking at his ownership as well, just 26.1%. So, I mean, for people who like to go against a template and go, pick low ownership players, you could do a lot worse than picking a 26% owned Mohamed Salah. And, if Haaland does start quietly or, gets a few 6-pointers instead of, 15-pointers and Salah does start hot and Liverpool start hot, you could be off to a flyer. And it could be the Haaland captainers who are chasing your tail to begin with. But yeah, I think Haaland has certainly changed the game.
Yeah, amazing. Great answer. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Let's go to easy now. Robbie to E. How are you, mate?
Hello, lads. You okay?
Yeah, I'm not bad.
Good,
Just
yeah,
a quick,
thank you.
just a quick one. I'm looking for some gems really from the teams that have been promoted.
Oh, this
Does
is
anyone
definitely you,
know any?
Mark. Yeah, some gems from the teams promoted. Go for it, Mark. I hope you've
Talk
prepared.
about putting a man on the spot.
I know. Flipping
You know what it is? Do you know what it is this season with promoted teams? You know, most seasons I will do, content on the podcast or some written content about the promoted teams. I'll go away and I'll look at last season's, information, the stats and all that kind of stuff. Maybe chat to a few season ticket holders and stuff like that. But I think last season and this season more so than ever, because of the way FPL priced the players, I feel like we don't need to go that low in, the Premier League table. The newly promoted teams. I don't think we need to go shopping there because there's bargain prices at, the bigger teams. It's not hard to pick a very good 15-man squad from teams in the top, 7, 8 teams in the league from last season. So I'm probably for the first time ever, I'm completely ignoring the promoted teams. I'm not looking at the numbers from last season. I'm not talking to any season ticket holders. The only thing I am keeping an eye out for is the 4 million options, and we seem to have one from each team. We've got Bayer at Burnley, Baldock at Sheffield United, and who's the third one? He also starts with B. We've got Bell at Luton. The three Bs. So those guys,
lovely.
3 Bs. I think Bayer at Burnley is my preference. Now he's in my current draft, but not even as a first sub. I like him as a second sub. Yeah. I've seen a few teams going for 2 4 million defenders on the bench. That's something I don't tend to do, but again, I probably will make a draft or two with it just to see how it feels. I think nowadays we don't get too many auto subs anyway, so I think it probably is a viable strategy. Yeah. So yeah, I would spend your cash on the better teams and probably stick to the 4 million options if you're looking at the promoted sides.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, there's an article on the Scout website called Best 4.5 Million FPL Midfielders. It's completely free. It's not behind a paywall or anything. So go on that. And we've got our editor, Neil, who is a genius. He is a genius, has done the research for you. So go and look at that, and that will be really helpful. Let's go to Shanoisy. Hello. My name's Shanoisy. Well, comes to Fest. In fact, your profile picture is from Fest. Is that
correct? Yes.
I can tell. How are you, mate?
Yeah,
I'm
right? Well, thank you. Nice to have these regular Thursday evening sessions. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Hi, Mark. I enjoy listening to your podcast, Mark. Always good. And one of the things that you tend to do at the start of the season, you sort of list out some rules that you're going to sort of play by or try to adhere to, lessons learned from last time. I'm not sure if you've done that already, but one of the things I'm hearing is about this season being classed as a normal FPL season, and I've never.
The aliens haven't invaded yet, Shanoisy. That's happening in about October.
Is it? Okay, fine. We can wait for that. I look forward to that. I've only been playing for a couple of years, so I don't know what a normal season brings. So, are there any guidelines or rules or anything that you can just help some of us new FPL players, relatively speaking, on what a normal season is compared with maybe some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years? What does it actually mean, and how does it change your game over the 38 weeks?
Hi, Shanoisy. Good chat to you. Good to hear you enjoy the podcast as well. New episode tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. I guess I'm sure you're not the only person tuning in who is, relatively new to the game, even if you've only played for the last 3 or 4 seasons. I think what you'll hear content creators referring to is the last normal season was probably 2018, 2019, because after that we had COVID interruptions, all the rest, Monarchs dying, and fixture disruption. A normal season is, obviously a lot less double game weeks. We know kind of early on where they're going to be. You'll have people just hoarding their chips for those. But I guess more so a normal season is, for me anyway, you can plan it. You can plan a lot more. I think in the last few years, especially in the COVID seasons, it was an absolute nightmare. You almost had to play week to week. You couldn't do any 4 to 6 to 8 week planning in terms of transfers and stuff like that, because you just didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't know which games were actually going to go ahead. So a normal season brings a bit more kind of structure. We kind of know exactly what's going to happen. We can kind of pinpoint, say, 5 game weeks time, I'm going to target that player because he plays for this team, because they've got, their fixtures turn in their favour and stuff like that. In terms of, and thanks for reminding me about the golden rules and stuff. I don't think I did that last season, but I did it probably for 2 or 3 seasons before that. And I'm definitely going to go back and do that, and I'll cover that on one of the podcasts before the season starts. What I used to do is just print out an A4 sheet of paper with bullet points, basically my overall kind of golden rules / strategy for the season, and I would stick it in my office beside the laptop where I make all of my FPL decisions. And then when it came to a Friday, I would literally, before I pull the trigger on a transfer, look at the A4 sheet of paper, and does my transfer kind of add up to those kind of things? I need to try and, maybe after this podcast, I will have a look on Twitter, because I'm pretty sure I probably shared a golden strategy A4 sheet on Twitter at one point. So I'll go back and I'll retweet that. So try and keep an eye out for that later as well. But it's certainly something I find it's a really good idea, because at this stage of the season, we've all got thoughts going around our mind about how we want to play the game. For example, in my mind, I'm thinking I want to play with a 4.5 goalkeeper all season. So getting that down on paper and kind of going back to it every time I play a wild card or a free hit or whatever. It's just good to have a reference point, because when the season kicks off, we all get swept along by the roller coaster. We forget what we planned to do before the season started. So it's good to kind of have a little list of golden rules or how you want to play the game. Try to think in terms of, the rest of your question was about a normal season and how does that change my style of play. I just go back to my kind of natural style of being very, very patient, rolling a transfer as often as possible to get that extra week of information and a bit of flexibility the week after. But again, let me dig out that sheet of golden rules from before, and I'll share it on Twitter hopefully after this Spaces.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Just to say as well, there's loads of you joining. Thank you. Feel free to request if you want to ask Mark a question. It's really easy on Spaces if you've never done it. I think you just click request. I'll let you in. But we've got someone back, Mark, who asked you a question earlier, and he feels you didn't answer it properly. FPL Junkie, go on.
I was waiting for him to come back about Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, here it is.
Thanks, Ed, for letting me back in. And no pressure, General. Just if you have any opinions on 6 million forwards, I would love to hear them.
I very cleverly bought myself some time to think about this one.
You did well. You did well. It was a master
good,
work there.
Because I'm looking at DCL, Ferguson, Visa. I mean, is it worth going there, or do we stick with an 8 million forward for that price point? That's what I wanted to check.
Yeah, good question. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about this. I put my first watch list together today for the season for Gameweek 1. There's no goalkeepers on it. I think there's 40 players across the 3 positions, and there's only one 6 million striker as far as I can remember, and it's Calvert-Lewin. Basically, want to keep a very close eye on him pre-season, and it's not about how he's performing, it's purely fitness, because if Calvert-Lewin is fit, we know there's a quality player there. And yes, it might be slightly concerning to go there. There could be an injury game week 2, game week 3, game week 4. Who knows? He might pull up with a hamstring in game week 1. But I think at 6 million, it's worth a gamble if we see some decent minutes and decent fitness in pre-season. For me, he's the pick at the moment of the 6 million forwards. Ferguson, like I said earlier, kind of same as in CISO, with Brighton playing in Europe. I'm concerned there'll be minutes managed, rotated, loads of options. De Zerbi's not afraid to rotate. And CISO and Ferguson are young, so I'm Irish. I've been watching Ferguson very closely. We're pinning a lot of our hopes on him for the next couple of years. But at the same time, I hope De Zerbi's careful with him and he doesn't overplay him. So for that reason, Calvert-Lewin at the moment is ahead of Ferguson for me. And Wissa, quite a few people talk about Wissa as well. But I just think if I go for a Bournemouth attacker, it probably will be Mbeumo. Probably penalties, 18 attacking returns last season. This could be Wissa's breakout with no Tony there. I know Shada's an option as well. But yeah, at the moment, I'd probably say Calvert-Lewin number 1, Ferguson a close second, and then Wissa's down the pecking order for me.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Jack, we've got a question from Jack, who's got a charming profile picture of him with his middle finger up. So there you go. Hope that's not us. Yeah. Go on, Jack. How are you?
How are you guys? So my question is, why is everyone preferring a 4.5 goalkeepers right now?
Why is everyone preferring the 4.5 goalkeepers?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, good question. Good question, Jack. I think historically in FPL, when it comes to the end of a season and you look at the points totals for goalkeepers, there's never a huge amount of points in it. And we've definitely had occasions in the past where the 4.5 goalkeepers match or often outscore the premium goalkeepers. And I think for me, when it comes down to it, for example, a 4.5 goalkeeper like Pickford versus Ederson at 5.5, 1 million, a 1 million saving can go an awful long way in your outfield players. That can be 2 upgrades. It can be a Bruno to a Rashford, which I'd like to do. It could be, a 5 million defender up to a 5.5 option. So it's very, historically, 4.5 goalkeepers have tended to be very good value. If you can get the right one, and you don't need to get the right one to begin with. You can kind of get in a Pickford or someone like that as a placeholder. Then hopefully after, 4, 5, 6 game weeks, or whenever we play the first wild card, it will be clear who the best 4.5 option is. We've had Emi Martinez before, Nick Pope when he was 4.5 at Burnley, Tom Heaton. There's been a lot of good options. Even Kepa and David Raya last season. So there will be 4.5 options who emerge, who rack up a lot of saves, a lot of bonus points, and you just save, 0.5 or 1 million. You spend it on your midfielders or your attackers. So it's kind of been and it's not a case of I'm not a fan of buying 2 4.5 million goalkeepers. I think you spend the minimum. You get a 4.5 set and forget. You play them every week, and then you put a 4.0 on the bench that you never use. Because what I've always found with rotation when I've tried it in the past, it's very hard to get it right, and it brings a lot of frustration. You could start. One of your 4.5s could be on the bench with a 10-pointer with a tougher fixture, and the other guy gets 2 points and you start him. So FPL is an extremely frustrating game, and I try to take as much frustration out of it as possible. And one way to do that is not to have 2 4.5 million goalkeepers.
Could I ask specifically, Mark, about Pickford? Because Pickford seems to be the 4.5 that people are considering. Sean Dyche could play 7 at the back. He could grind out these 0-0s. Are Everton going to become a defensive force or not?
I think Pickford's a good example of if you spend too much time on Twitter like I do, it's like a automatic Twitter bubble pick when I put my first draft together. I don't think he's in my second one. I think it's Johnston from Crystal Palace. But basically, I think the goalkeeper position will probably be the last one that I finalise. There's a lot up in the air. Onana could be tempting if he's a good price if he comes in. We're waiting to see. We're waiting for David Raya to leave Brentford because I think Flecken will be very popular if that happens. Pickford's... It's probably more about Sean Dyche than it is about Jordan Pickford, because we know what he did with Tom Heaton and Nick Pope in his Burnley days. We know they're kind of well set for saves, from long distance and stuff like that. So I think Pickford could be the best 4.5 option. That's not to say, I'll go there in game week 1. And honestly, I don't think goalkeepers, especially the 4.5 options, I don't think it's worth stressing over too much game week 1, because it's almost impossible to pinpoint who's going to be the best one. You probably got to give it a couple of weeks, have a placeholder there, and then make a switch or else on the first wild card.
Okay, just to tell Jack. Jack, are you there? Do you want to come back on that, Jack?
My next question.
No problem, Jack.
My next question is so the 4.
Sorry, I had to get rid of Jack because it was far too much feedback. FPL Buzz is a great name to go to next, because that was Buzz from Jack's speaker. Buzz, come on. What was the question?
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for the answer on Enciso. I've actually taken him out of my draft now, thanks to the advice there. But also, I want to talk about Chelsea defenders, because I'm having a similar problem, really. Is it Chilwell James? I've seen a lot of drafts on YouTube, other places on Twitter as well. Chilwell and James seem to be the go-to, but there's a host of defenders at 4.5. You've got Badiashile, Chalobah, Colwill, Fofana, Sarr. I think there's a couple more in there as well. Are they ones to avoid, or is it just purely Chilwell James are the best 2 options to go with up for Chelsea? Because after game week 2, their fixtures are probably the best out of all 20 teams, I'd say. So I don't get your opinions really on, is it Chilwell James or none at all?
Yeah, good
Mark,
question.
Mark, I was going to say, just to add to that, I heard a rumour today that who's going to be on Chelsea penalties? Is it going to be Nkunku or is it going to be Reece James? So there's another thing to consider, but go for it.
Yeah, I think we're all hoping that Reece James gets them, but we're probably living in hope there more than anything else. I know there was comments last season that he might have been second in line or something like that, but I think my money probably would be on Nkunku if he's on the pitch. But again, hopefully Reece James can get them, because if he does, then maybe we don't need a Trent Alexander-Arnold if we've got a penalty taking Reece James. But I also seen today that Reece James was having, I think, a precautionary scan. Now people are panicking, but it does seem to be precautionary, probably just checking everything's okay. But again, straight away, there's a warning sign for me. Scars from the past. He's often injured. And Buzz mentioned all the 4.5 options there. If you go even further down, you've got Malo Gusto, who's only 4 million. That could be a mistake. They probably should have made him 4.5. Gusto could be the Reece James replacement when he does get injured or he does need, time out to manage his fitness and stuff like that. So in terms of the question, for me, if I start with a Chelsea defender, it will be Reece James or Ben Chilwell. I just think they've got the most attacking potential. They've got a lot of FPL pedigree. The 4.5 options, we just don't know who Pochettino is going to use. But once one of those emerges, let's say Colwill stays at Chelsea, becomes first choice, a lot of people will go there. It kind of reminds me of Kepa last season. We knew once he got his place at 4.5, everybody went there after the World Cup, or most people went there after the World Cup. And I think if, once we give Chelsea a couple of weeks, when it comes to first wildcard, you'll see a lot of managers picking whichever 4.5 defender is getting the most minutes, whether it be, Barishile, Colwill. There's loads. Fofana, it could be anyone. Or even when it gets to first wildcard time, if Reece James does have a long-term injury, and if Malo Gusto is getting the right back slot, which is likely at 4 million, he'll become, a must-have in every team. So at the moment, I don't have any Chelsea players in my draft number 2. I did have Nkunku in the first one. I'll probably get tempted by James and Chilwell probably 3 or 4 days before the season starts. But most likely, I'll take a wait-and-see approach probably with Chelsea. Just see how they start the season, see who's getting the minutes. That goes for the likes of Sterling and Mudryk and all those guys as well. And then decide where the best place to invest is, basically.
Great, thanks, Mark. Just going to take 1 minute of your time to talk about Scout. This is the best time to join Scout if you never have. We've got a world-leading pre-season package that includes things like a minutes tracker and all sorts. So there's a tweet that I've put up at the top there. If you click that, there's a link to get 30% off in pre-season. And I thought I'd ask Mark, this is only going to be 30 seconds to a minute because we don't want to make this an ad thing. It's a free bit of content, but Mark, how have you benefited from Scout membership over the years? Because I know that you've been a member for years, right?
Yeah, I've been using Scout for as long as I can remember. If you go to my Twitter account, I think there's 400. I follow 400 people. I set up my account in 2015, and the first account shows up as Fantasy Football Scout. So there's evidence that I've been a Scout fan from day one. And it was the first, probably one of the reasons I signed up to Twitter was to follow Scout, people like Ben Dinnery and all that kind of stuff. So Scout for me, what I've used it most for, fixtures are king for me. So when it comes to building a Gameweek 1 team, fixtures are number one. And creature of habit, I've always used the Scout fixture ticker. While I'm there, the stats section, the Opta stats, and I like being able to make my own stats tables, custom stats tables. So those are probably the two main things I use. And then you've also got the comparison tool. So if I'm 50-50 on a player, a little comparison tool, kind of use that to come up with my decision. And at this stage of the season as well, when I am putting together the Elite 64 leagues and I'm looking for talented FPL managers with incredible records, the Fantasy Football Scout Hall of Fame is somewhere where I go as well to pick out a few guys, send them a few messages and add them to the league. So yeah, I've been a Scout member for years. I highly recommend it if you're not already using it.
Thanks. I'm pretty sure I'll be in the Elite 64 next year, so that's great.
Yeah, keep trying.
I will. Nuclear Atoms, hello, a Scout, Scout regular, Scout favourite. What's your question? How are you?
Hey, my question was not about actually my team, but actually about Mark, and it's that, why can't you play differently for one season? You have many seasons ahead of you. Football managers change tactics to revolutionize and stuff and improve. So why not FPL managers actually change their tactics and go ahead and win the damn thing actually?
Oh, okay. A bit of a challenge there, Mark. Why don't you try and win it? Come on, Mark. Pathetic. Go for it.
That's the best question of the night so far. Thanks for that, Nuclear Atoms. If I'm being totally honest, it's probably just fear of having a shocker, because I had a shocker probably, I think it was 5 seasons back. I had a shocker. I think I finished like 500k. And I remember being out of my comfort zone in that season and kind of getting talked into doing things that I don't usually do, and it clearly didn't work. And like I said, I think the chances of winning the whole thing are so tiny that I don't want to rip up my whole strategy.
Mark, can I just say that Ali Guns, the winner of last year's, is listening to us right now?
Well, we need to get him on here and he needs to tell me what I need to do this season.
I know, unbelievable, isn't it? But carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe it doesn't sound great to say I'm not going to go and try and win the whole thing. I think, to be fair, when every one of us picks a game week 1 team, we're all thinking we're going to go and win it. And I also think that if I just had if you can run hot and you can have a pretty lucky season, you probably could win it the way I play the game if you just get lucky with your picks and stuff like that. Because if you think of last season, I was 1.1 million at the World Cup, and then I finished 15k. But if I just had even a pretty standard first half of the season, or if I could have matched my first half of the season with my second half of the season, probably wouldn't have been far away from a top 1k or a top 500. So I think it is possible to win it with my play style, but it probably means being a bit more aggressive towards the end of the season. But yeah, maybe I'm a coward for not trying to win it, but I don't want to have a shocker, because I think if I go outside my comfort zone, chances are it'll just blow up my face again.
Good answer. Thanks for that. Let's get a question from Riaz Ahmed. Riaz, hello, how are you? Where are you from? And what's your question? You might have to unmute yourself.
Yep. I'm Riaz. I'm from UK. So I live in Leamington in England.
Brilliant.
So my question is, what is going to be the strategy which will be feasible for getting around 60 points on average for the first 5 to 6 weeks? So I'm thinking of a 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. I'm not a very experienced FPL player. I've played for 5 years and I've been all over the place, and I've finished top 1.5k once. It was a 1 season wonder. Apart from that, I'm just terrible. So I just want to have a good start this season, because I have never had a good start in FPL for a long time. So yeah.
Oh, great question. Thank you, Riaz. So first of all, how amazing that we've got someone who finished 1.5k, but they still say that they're rubbish and it was a fluke. I mean, you don't get that very often. So yeah, thank you for that. Mark, what do you reckon?
Yeah, cheers for the question, Riaz. I think very, very important in FPL, especially nowadays, is to have a good start, because with so many people out there just copying content creators or, using websites basically to pick their teams for them, if you fall behind, it's tougher than ever to make up the ground, because sometimes you're forced to go, with differentials that you don't really want to pick, but you don't think they're optimal, and you can just, dig yourself a bigger hole. So very, very important to get off to a good start. I always just keep it simple in game week 1. For me, number 1, fixtures. I probably look at the first 4 game weeks, which teams have the best fixtures, and that's my starting point. I put in the obvious ones. Haaland goes in. Haaland gets captain most weeks. Trent's probably going to go in. And it's, fixtures mainly, and proven assets. I would stick to guys who've been in FPL before, who've done well in FPL before. Avoid the promoted teams. Focus on the teams towards the top of the league. Basically, get as many players from the top teams from last season as you can. And I would say don't try and be different just for the sake of being different. Just start. I always think of FPL as a marathon, and what do most people do at the start of a marathon? They start off slowly. They start off jogging very, very slowly. At the
start of a marathon, I usually start by crying, but carry on.
Yeah. So you don't want to be crying like Ed after a couple of game weeks. So don't go. I would say don't. I don't tend to bother with player ownership, but I know some people like to use it as a gauge, as maybe a safe start to the season. You can see which players are highly owned. You can see which players can hurt you if they do well. So if you want to just stay with the pack, you can have a look at ownership and stuff like that as well. But certainly just keep it. Focus on the fixtures, first 3-4 game weeks, proven assets, and don't take too many risks.
Great answer. We're getting questions flooding in now. So Tommy Beans, what a great name! Lovely banner as well on your on your Twitter. How are you? Oh, you've only requested. I need to add you as a speaker. Okay, I'm adding you now, Tommy. Tommy's coming in. Tommy, how are you? And what's your question? You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. I hope you can all hear me okay. This is the first time I've ever used Spaces, and it's very, very exciting.
Welcome.
Thank you. My question to you guys, to give you a little bit of background, I'm also a fairly newer player to this, played for about 3 or 4 years. And a question that I have is not necessarily about the players that I'm bringing in, because I feel I do all right at that. It's about money management. Especially at the start of the season, we have a lot of really good budget picks. And I'm finding in my drafts, I often have sometimes 1.52 million sitting in the bank as kind of a liquid asset to be able to upgrade to, take the step up to the next bracket of players if I need to.
Crikey, you're sensible. Yeah, go on. That's good. You're different to me. You're better than me, clearly, but go
on. I just wanted to ask, really, is this a viable strategy, or do I feel, should I be spending my money on those premiums from the outset and then taking that little bit of a gamble to say, have to do a double transfer further down the line?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tommy. First thing I'll say is any chance of a loan, because I could do with some of that £2 million you've got sitting by in the bank there. But yeah, good question on money management. I think what I always say to people when they're building their squads, and it kind of goes for any point in the season, in particular game week 1 and when you're playing your wild cards, is if you come up with a 15-man team that you're extremely happy with, and there is money left over, you don't spend it just for the sake of spending it, because various different points in the season, for example, game week 1, the highest scoring team in total in game week 1 will probably not cost 100 million. It might be 95 million. It might be 90 million. That's kind of the way I think of it. You don't need to spend every penny. And it's one of the most frustrating things in FPL is when you get to game week 2, if you don't have any cash in the bank, if you don't make a transfer early, which I don't like doing, and you get to Friday and you want to make a move for your target game week 2, and you're already 0.1 million short because someone's gone up or someone's gone down. So I think leaving 0.5 million in the bank is advisable, but there's been plenty of seasons where I've spent every penny in game week 1, because if I think the best team I can get costs 100 million, I'll spend it and I'll just figure out the other issues later. But again, if you've got 1.5 million or 2 million in the bank, it gives you a lot of flexibility. A lot of managers would probably answer this and tell you should spend every penny and get it on the pitch, but I don't tend to agree with that, because there's always gems. There's always very good cheap options. Look at last season. We could have, built teams for 95 million last season, 90 million even, with all the Brighton guys, the Arsenal guys, and we would have did absolutely fine. So if you're very happy with a 15-man draft, if you like a bit of flexibility for future transfers, then by all means leave some cash in the bank.
Great answer. Thank you. Let's move to Vaughan. Vaughan Jansen. How are you, Vaughan? Nice to have you.
Hi.
What's your question?
I hope you can hear me well there.
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
My question is, does pre-season friendlies ultimately...
Okay, I spoke too soon. We could not hear him very well. Let's get Jack back in. Jack, hello. How are you, mate? I know you asked before. Your question was kind of answered. You're back again. What's your question? You'll have to unmute yourself. You're in. Jack?
Yeah?
Jack? Sounds like the Titanic. Go on. What's your question?
My question is, with Mar is likely leaving Manchester City, should we bring in Foden?
Oh, that's a good question. I do like that one. Because Gianni today, I listened on Fantasy Football Scout, had Foden in his draft, and I was thinking, Foden's always on the bench. But Gianni's point was maybe this is his year. Is it, General? Is this Foden's year? He's going to start all the games. You'll never start all games under Pep. Is he going to get the majority of minutes?
Every pre-season, there's a player that is in 0 of my drafts until the day of the deadline. And I feel like that player this season could be Phil Foden. I don't think he'll be in too many of my drafts, but if we get to Pep's press conference on the Friday of game week 1, while I'm on the train heading to Fest, if there's positive vibes, if it looks like Foden's going to start the first game or the first couple of games, if De Bruyne is injured, if Mahrez is gone at that point, who knows what's going to happen there. I really like a punt on Foden because let's face it, City are the best team in the league. Everyone's going to have Haaland. Everyone's going to captain Haaland, so you don't benefit from that. You could take a gamble on a defender. I'm not sure if I'm willing to do that, but someone like a Foden or a Grealish, but it is Foden in particular that tickles my fancy for game week 1. I think his ownership, at a guess, is probably about 10%. If we get closer to the season, if he gets lots of preseason minutes, if he gets some good comments from Pep, I think there'll be a late scramble for him in game week 1. Yeah, I've got Madison, I think, and Jared Bowen in my team at the moment, but I would love to have Foden in one of those spots. So certainly a wait and see preseason. And I'm willing to gamble on one of those midfield spots.
I love that. Love that. I've currently, Enciso and Foden are in my drafts, which they've both come up tonight, but I'm a moron, so who knows. Patrick is connecting. Patrick, hello, how are you? Where are you from, and what's your question? Sounds a bit like blind date, doesn't
A little
it?
bit.
Where are you from, and what's your question?
Yeah. So I'm from the United States. My question.
Whereabouts?
Yeah. Wisconsin. It's
Nice.
Yeah,
I was in Boston last week for 4th of July.
Oh, nice. That must have been a lot of fun. Boston's a good city.
Those bloody Brits. Thank goodness we got rid of them.
Right.
Anyway, go
Exactly.
on, Patrick. What's your question?
Yeah. So my question is, I think Heung-min Son and James Maddison are both really interesting aspects. Does their stock go up or down if Harry Kane leaves Spurs?
Oof, great question. Go on, Mark.
Oh, another toughie. Good question, Patrick. Great talking to you. Thanks for the question. Like I said, I've only made 2 drafts. My first draft had Heung-min Son. My second draft had James Maddison. So I'm quite keen on both players. Not sure which one I'll end up on just yet, but there's a good chance I'll go for one of them. I'm kind of biased here because I'm a Celtic fan, big fan of Postecoglou, hope he does well. So I quite like, having one of those picks kind of for my own reasons. Are they better or worse picks if Harry Kane leaves? I would tend to say worse because I think Tottenham as a whole will be worse if you take out an incredibly talented player. And when I think of Harry Kane, I think of goals, but I also think of all those balls, he threads through for Heung-min Son, how good their relationship's been over the years. I think they might have set the record for goals and assists or combining with each other in one of those seasons. So if I'm going to go for Son or Maddison in game week 1, I think I'll be more likely to do it if Harry Kane is still there, because I think overall the team is better, the attack's better, and Kane doesn't just score goals, he creates goals. So I hope Heung-min Son has his mate there this season, and I'm very excited to see what Maddison adds to that team as well. So yeah, I think it's probably worse for those guys if Kane leaves, although one of them probably gets penalties, which might boost some appeal there.
Could I add to that question, Mark, and just ask, Perisic leaving, is that good for Son? That might have been asked in the question. I was kind of doing all sorts of things, but Perisic leaving, does that make a difference?
I don't think it made too much of a difference. I think some people probably read into some stuff last season that maybe Perisic and Son on the same side didn't really work. So maybe that could be good news for Son. But to be honest, I don't read too much into those kind of things. For me, it's more so Son seems to have been carrying an injury all season, some kind of hernia issue. Fresh start, new manager. But the big one's a 3 million price drop. This player is capable of mega points in FPL. So I feel like, Rashford got a 3 million drop. We've seen what he did. And I'm hoping Heung-min Son can be this season's Rashford in terms of the player who gets the big price drop and comes back with a bang.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Let's take a question from Andrew. So, general, by the way, Mark has to go in 5 minutes at 9 o'clock sharp. So let's get them in quickly. So, Andrew, what's your question?
Quick one then, guys. It's just about strategies for differential. Do you try and target differential early, or do you sort of wait until we've sort of got up and running and half a dozen games under the belt? Yeah, where?
Oh, good question. Good question. Yeah, can I say immediately? My response is I've always gone for differentials at the start, and it's never ever worked. So, Mark, please enlighten us.
Cheers for the question, Andrew. You're probably asking the wrong person about differentials because you'll very rarely see me buy one. I play a very safe FPL game. Even last season, I had to fight back from 1.1 million at the World Cup stage, and there was a lot of temptation there, with the unlimited transfers to pick up, quite a few differentials and really attack it. But in the end, I just opted for the slow and steady, snail approach, just get green arrow after green arrow, even if they're small, and thankfully ended up having a pretty good season in the end. So if I was a more aggressive, exciting manager, would I tend to do it at the start or the end? I tend to like the end more so. I know other managers will probably argue the start's better because we don't know what we don't know. And I guess the approach, if you do your differentials at the start and it doesn't work out, you've got plenty of time to claw it back. But I just like it when we've got more information, when you've seen the players, when you've seen the stats, when you know what you're getting. I tend to rather do that towards the end of the season rather than at the start. But I don't think there's a wrong or right way to do it if you want to play that way. I think there's opportunities to do it in both ways.
Great, thank you for that. That's really good. Let's go for... We've got Andy Mode here. Hello, I'll invite him as a speaker. Andy, how are you? You all right?
Oh, how's it going?
For those who don't know Andy, Andy's a sizable FPL account. He wouldn't call himself an influencer, but he certainly influences me on a night out. So he also works for Scout and runs the Scoutcast. So Andy, how are you? And what is your question? I'm sure it's not for general. It's probably for me. So
probably, yeah. No, I'm good. Thank you very much for putting me on. I got a bit of a question for Mark. Shock horror.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. My question is about our team, obviously Manchester United. And I'm just wondering which players you are thinking you might start game week 1 with, because at the moment I'm on a triple up.
Cheers, Andy. Good chatting to you. I'm looking forward to meeting you in a couple of weeks' time as well for a beer or 10, I'm sure.
At Fantasy Football Fest, get your tickets at www.ff-fest.com.
I teed you up nicely there, didn't I?
You did. Thanks. Carry on.
Yeah, Manchester United assets. I could end up on a triple up as well. I've currently got Luke Shaw, who I think is still a good price this season at 5.5. Just kind of nice, steady Eddie. Kind of suits my style of play rather than going for a James or a Chilwell. Bruno Fernandes, I know he was the first price that came out, but even though it was the first one, it really, I think, made a lot of us kind of piqued our interest right away. I know maybe not as much when you see some of the others, but I still think 8.5 is a ridiculous price for Bruno Fernandes. One's cost 12 million, so hopefully we'll get him back to his best this season. Hopefully Mason Mount coming in will allow Bruno to get back to his FPL best. And then Rashford, I think Rashford, Bruno, Shaw triple up is very likely for me because I like the fixtures to begin with. I like all of the prices. They're all proven assets. If I can only squeeze one in midfield, I do slightly favour Rashford. Just go after the goal scorer. Hopefully he can do what he did last season. But yeah, I'm probably leaning towards the triple up at the moment. Shaw, Bruno and Rashford.
Yeah, that's the three that I've got at the moment. So yeah, I feel like I'm in good company there. Lovely stuff.
Great. Let's get Mark, you ready around for one more question? Last question.
Let's go, as long as it's a good one.
Okay, well, Abu Bakr Abed, ask your question away. Mark is leaving after this. This is your moment. Go for it.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for offering this space because it's really important, I think. So my question is just probably it's heard before, but I don't think it's no longer important because which is something like I've been suffering from for a while playing the game. So sometimes when we don't get that that tally points in a single game week, we feel that we should change players, and we feel that these players will not give. But we do it we do it, and then again the players we sold produced, and the players we buy do not produce. So what do you think is the best strategy to do with such a problem, because it's really important to go on for? And thank you.
Yeah, cheers, Abubakar. I think what you're saying there is, a player disappoints and you sell them right away, and then you bring the guy in and he disappoints and the guy you sold gets the points. And that's, one of the most frustrating aspects of FPL. But I mean, the way I've always played, I preach patience. When I buy a player, for example, all the picks I make in game week 1, I'm not buying any of them for just 1 or 2 game weeks. You've got to give them more, than 1 game week to deliver. Especially if the eye test is decent or the underlying numbers are good. If a player has good underlying numbers but they get you 2 points in a game week, hold on to them, because chances are they'll deliver, soon after that. So yeah, it's all about patience. Give players plenty of time and don't jump off them too quickly.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Mark's going to go now. Everyone wave bye if they can. I'm waving. Goodbye, Mark.
Cheers, everyone. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you very much for that.
Thanks for the engagement, everyone.
No, that's great. Thank you. We'll continue for another 10 minutes for the after party, maybe a bit longer, depending how on things go. If you've got a question, we've got no one to answer the questions who's good. I mean, Ali Guns has apparently got a question, which, go wild. I think he's trying to wave, to be honest, because it's midnight there. I think we'll end it there, to be honest. But this is going to be a regular thing. Thursday at 8 p.m, you're going to get to ask a expert your questions. Please do consider joining the Home of Fantasy Football, where all these experts work. We've got pro pundits like Gianni Battici, FPL Focal, who's in the chat. The last year's winner, FPL Guns in the chat. FPL General. We've got so many people. Andy Modi just asked a question. Have a great week. See you next Thursday. Who knows who it's going to be, but we'll tweet it soon. Thank you very much, everyone.